I still remember the look on her face when I said, "Ms. Davis, you're under arrest." The room went dead quiet. Her clipboard slipped from her hands, and for the first time in years, my neighbors finally saw justice happen right in front of them. But let me back up, because you need to understand how a small suburban HOA managed to turn my life into a war zone. 3 weeks after moving into Maple Creek Estates, I thought I'd found peace. Nice houses, quiet streets, the kind of neighborhood where people wave but don't pry. I'd spent 20 years in law enforcement and figured I'd earned a little calm. That lasted until a bunch of teenagers burst through my backyard gate like they owned the place. Their leader, a tall kid with bleached hair and the kind of smirk that says, "I've never heard the word no," pointed at me and said, "Get out. This is our pool now." I laughed at first, thought it was a joke. It wasn't. The kid, Kevin, said, "My mom's the HOA president. She said all pools gotta be shared for community spirit, so move." Then he cannonballed into my pool and splashed my coffee all over my paper. His friends filmed it laughing like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. When they finally left dripping wet and full of attitude, he said, "We'll be back tomorrow. Make it more welcoming next time." I just smiled because I'd dealt with punks like him before, just not in my own backyard. The next morning, right at 6 a.m., came the knock. Loud, official, like someone serving papers. Standing there was a woman in a navy blazer, sharp haircut, smile, like she practiced it in the mirror. "Good morning," she said, stepping inside without waiting. "I'm Linda Davis, president of the Maple Creek HOA. We need to talk about your attitude problem." I said, "My attitude problem?" She nodded, flipping through her clipboard. "My son mentioned yesterday's misunderstanding. You can't just keep the community pool to yourself." "Ma'am," I said, "that's my private pool. I paid for it." She gave me that pitying smile people use right before they ruin your day. According to Regulation 47, subsection C, all recreational amenities must be shared for community harmony. Non-compliance leads to daily fines, and in extreme cases, removal from the community. Her tone was calm, polite, but I'd seen that look before. People who think power makes them untouchable. "Mrs. Davis." I said, "I'll review the regulations." She smiled, satisfied. "Excellent. Kevin and his friends will be back this afternoon. I trust there won't be any unpleasantness." Then she clicked out the door like she owned the place. From that day on, it was open season. She showed up in my yard with a tape measure and camera at dawn, snapping pictures of my grass. By 8 a.m., I had a citation taped to my windshield. Non-exceeds community height standard by 1/4 inch. Fine $50 per day. The next day, another fine. Unauthorized fence modification. Someone had loosened a board overnight. It was harassment disguised as procedure. Then came the call. "Mr. Cooper," she said sweetly, "I wanted to ensure you understand the urgency of compliance." I looked out my window as she spoke. Her son was in my pool again, this time with 8 friends, music blasting, coolers out, beer cans floating in the water. "Linda," I said, "your boy's trespassing again. Should I assume that's part of your harmony plan?" She hung up. That afternoon, my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Anderson, came over trembling. She did the same to the Millers. She whispered. They fought back, and she buried them in fines until they sold their house. Later, Robert Wilson told me she made him repaint his home 3 times, same approved color, cost him $8,000. That's when I realized this wasn't about community standards. It was about control. Friday night, things turned ugly. Kevin and his friends rolled up with beer, baseball bats, and bad intentions. "Party time," he yelled, kicking my gate open. "Mom says you're finally cooperating. They trashed my backyard, smashed my pool lights, threw furniture in the water, even started peeing in my pool while live streaming it. "We're live right now," he shouted, laughing. 50 people watching. I didn't move. I just said, having fun. "Kevin, the best," he grinned. "You can't do anything, old man. My mom runs this neighborhood." That's when I knew they'd handed me everything I needed. The live stream would be evidence gold. When they finally stumbled off, I called an old friend from the sheriff's office. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It's time." By the next morning, I had the full picture. Mrs. Anderson brought me a shoebox full of fake violations, threatening letters, $4,000 in fines. Robert added receipts for $8,000 in forced repainting. A pattern was clear. Dozens of families extorted $89,000 in HOA money, missing, all tied back to Linda. The HOA's landscaping contracts. Fake companies under her maiden name. Kevin's videos showed her son committing multiple felonies, while she called it community spirit. They'd built their own case file without realizing it. My colleagues verified everything. "You sure you want to handle this one yourself?" they asked. I nodded. She wanted a meeting. Let's give her one. When Linda called an emergency HOA meeting the next week, the community center was packed. She stood at the front like a politician running for re-election. Kevin sitting behind her, looking smug. "We're here tonight," she said, "to address a threat to our community. Mr. Cooper has been hostile, disruptive, and dangerous to our children." The crowd murmured, nervous. I raised my hand. "Mrs. Davis, could you explain what legal authority allows you to turn private property into community space?" She blinked. "The HOA bylaws, which you agreed to follow." "Interesting," I said, flipping through a folder. "Because the last election shows only 3 ballots out of 127 homes. Yours, your friends, and your son's. He was 17. Not exactly legal, right?" A ripple went through the room. "That's irrelevant," she snapped. "So is the $89,000 you collected in fake fines," I added. The room erupted. People started shouting. Robert stood up, shaking with anger. "You made me repaint my house 3 times. Anderson yelled, "You made me afraid to check my own mail." Linda tried to shout over them, but the noise drowned her out. I walked to the front, slow and steady, and said, "You want to talk about authority? Let's do that." I reached into my jacket and pulled out my badge. Sheriff Daniel Cooper County Law Enforcement. 20 years of service. You could hear a pin drop. Kevin froze. Linda's face went white. "This meeting," I said, "is now part of an official investigation into fraud, embezzlement, and property destruction." I laid down the photos, the receipts, and screenshots from Kevin's live stream. Kevin Davis, vandalism, trespassing, intoxication, and public broadcast of criminal activity. Linda Davis, fraud, harassment, and embezzlement of HOA funds. Kevin started crying. "Mom, you said he couldn't touch us." Linda tried to regain control. "This is entrapment, no." I said, "This is accountability." 2 deputies stepped through the door. "Ma'am, sir, stand up, please." Kevin begged, "I'm sorry, I'll fix it," but the cuffs were already out. Linda kept muttering about lawyers, even as they read her rights. The sound of those cuffs clicking shut. That was the sound of 3 years of fear ending. The room stayed quiet for a moment. Then Mrs. Anderson began to clap. One by one, everyone joined in. When it was over, Robert came up to me. "Sheriff, do we get our money back?" I nodded. "Every cent with interest." "And this HOA, it's getting rebuilt right." People started crying, hugging, thanking me. Mrs. Anderson said, You gave us our lives back. I told her. No, ma'am, you took them back yourselves. I just gave you the chance. You know, people always ask why I didn't flash my badge the first day Kevin stormed into my yard. Why I waited. The truth is, if I'd pulled rank, they'd have gone quiet, maybe moved on, maybe done it again somewhere else. Sometimes you have to let people show the world exactly who they are before justice sticks. That's the difference between scaring someone and stopping them. So yeah, that happened. And I've got my peace back now. Same pool, same coffee, same morning quiet. Only difference is when I look out my window now, I see neighbors who smile for real. Tell me what you think, though. Was I right to wait it out and let them dig their own hole, or should I have stopped it sooner? Drop a comment. Share your story, because I'm sure I'm not the only one who's had to deal with a Linda Davis in their life.